Chris Paul is a choker. That's a narrative that's been surrounding his career for a good amount of time now. I would say around 2014 to 2015 is where he officially picked up the label, and as he took his talents to Houston this summer, all you heard was, oh cool, now they have two chokers. Now here we are in December, the Rockets look amazing, but the majority of NBA fans still expect to see them quote unquote choke in the playoffs. But have you ever stopped to ask yourself exactly why you think about them this way? I think this video is going to put that label out of its misery, and afterwards you can go share your thoughts on it with other fans on the Hardwood Amino app. I've had the app for about a year now, so you may have heard of it, and basically if you're an NBA fan, you want this in your life. On Hardwood Amino, you can join blogging leagues, get ton of exposure for the articles you write, create polls and quizzes, interact with other people's polls and quizzes, and join public chat rooms. The chat rooms are probably my favorite part because during games you can normally find a live chat going on that you can join in to discuss what's happening. The quizzes are also a ton of fun, as you might already know because you just saw a video of me going through a few, and they're created by members of the community, so they're actually pretty challenging. If you want to get the app and follow me, my username is on the screen and you can read a couple of the blogs I've made. The link to the app is in the description and in the comment section, so I hope to see you there. So I think it's important to establish right off the bat that there's a difference between choking and losing. Yes, they're related because choking often leads to losing, but they're not the same thing, and I think that's what's gotten people confused. It's kind of like how you can be a PC gamer without being an elitist, heavily related, just not the same thing. So when I see Chris Paul, I see what's probably going to be a top 5 point guard in NBA history, and then I hear he's a career choker, so I start looking for the examples and trying to remember what I've seen from him, and as I go back, what I find is that he's fallen victim to blanket statements that NBA fans love to use without backing up any of what they're saying. But for the sake of this video, I'm going to start by playing along and laying out the quote unquote evidence that these fans think they have. So a pretty safe place we can start is with the obvious stigma that's followed him around. He's never been outside of the second round of the playoffs. What makes that worse is that he's played in 76 career playoff games, and that's the most anybody's played without a conference finals appearance. Next, his 6-season tenure with the Clippers was wildly disappointing in the eyes of many. Most people gave him a pass for not winning with the Hornets because that team was never that great, but being paired with high flyers DeAndre Jordan and Blake Griffin along with some pretty nice support pieces should have been enough, right? Yet they never made any noise as they were eliminated in the first round 3 times and became the first team in NBA history to blow a series lead in 5 straight postseasons. Being that Paul was always seen as a leader of that team, all the blame falls square on his shoulders, and without anybody doing any kind of research or just applying what they actually saw to the argument, they just label him a choker and move right on. Okay, so now that that's out of the way, I'm gonna give facts to the people who aren't trying to push a bogus narrative. Problem 1 was saying he's a choker. Stats don't tell the whole story, which is why there's more parts of this video you need to see before leaving an angry comment, but it gives us a good basis to start. If you take a look at Chris Paul's career statistics, you can clearly see that he actually steps his game up from the regular season to the playoffs. Chris Paul for his playoff career averages 21 points, 9 assists, 2 steals, 5 rebounds, and shoots 48% from the field. The special part about this is that out of all players in NBA history, there's only been 22 to average 21 points and 9 assists for the playoffs. Out of those 22, only 8 guys have managed to do it more than once, and Chris Paul is one of them as he's done it on 3 separate occasions. Problem number 2 with calling him a choker. It almost completely ignores the circumstances of his playoff losses. I once saw a video called "The Clippers Are Cursed" and the man wasn't lying. Last year, Blake Griffin broke a bone in his foot during Game 3 against the Jazz, pretty much severely hindering their chances to win that series. The year before that, both Griffin and Paul got hurt against the Blazers as they bowed out in the first round. The year before that, Chris Paul pulled his hamstring and still somehow managed to beat the San Antonio Spurs before missing time in the Rockets series. And an entire season before that, Griffin sprained his ankle in the Grizzlies series, causing him to all but miss Game 6 where they were eliminated. And then you look at Paul and Griffin's time played together during the regular season and realize either one or the other was missing some type of significant time after 2014, which probably made it kinda hard to get a rhythm going for the playoffs. But you know what, those are the facts that probably sound like excuses to you, so let's go ahead and get into problem number 3 that pretty much proves this choker narrative is just plain lazy. I doubt many of the people that push this narrative have ever taken the time to judge Paul apart from his teams in the playoffs, so I did it for him. What you see on your screen right now is 2 things. 1, you see Chris Paul's series averages for who they lost to in a particular year. For example, you can see he put up 22 and 12 against the Lakers when he was eliminated in 2012. The other thing you see is his numbers in every closeout game of his career, and there's been 20 of them so far. Closeout games are either when he's been on the brink of elimination or when his team was up about to eliminate the opponent. So now you know what these are, let's analyze them. First, we'll look at these series and try to figure out which ones he was supposed to win, how he performed, and where he actually choked. Quick note, we're gonna go out of order a bit, so hang tight. 2008 was his playoff debut against the defending champion San Antonio Spurs. Do I need to say any more? Yes, the Hornets were a higher seed by 1 place, but again, it's the Spurs. Also, look at his numbers for that series. Did the Hornets lose because Paul didn't play well? I would argue that this was one of the best stat lines for a player in his first postseason ever. Also, I would like to point you to that game 7 where he put up 18 points, 14 assists, 8 rebounds, 5 steals, and played all 48 minutes. What else could you have possibly asked for from a player against the defending champions, yet alone in his first postseason? Check out the line he put up in 2011 against, yep, you guessed it, another defending champion. His efforts led the Hornets to 6 against the Lakers in a series that roster had no shot at winning. In 2013, they were knocked off by the Grizzlies, and again I ask, how was this Chris Paul's fault? He was scoring, he was efficient, he didn't turn over the ball much, and then again look at his stats in the closeout game that they lost by 7. If LeBron put up these numbers in a closeout loss, you'd be saying he was carrying his team with no help, but Paul is somehow a choker for this? He shot 68% and didn't turn over the ball 1 time that game. Are you also just going to ignore that Blake Griffin only played 13 minutes because of an ankle injury? Not going to mention Caron Butler shooting 43%, Odom shooting 38%, Billups 25%. Oh, okay, I get it. We only pay attention to that stuff when it's LeBron's teammates. Nobody else gets that pass. Alright, cool. Moving on. 2015 is probably the signature moment of his career so far for the right and wrong reasons. If you remember that Spurs series, they were the defending champs again, and Paul beating them with that game winner made people think that his postseason troubles were finally gone. Here's a stat line from the game 7, and this should be even more impressive to you when you realize he did that on a pulled hamstring. Do you play sports? You know what a pulled hamstring feels like? Yeah, then you should have respect for this performance, as it's even better than most of his outings when he was healthy. And then there's the infamous meltdown in the very next series, which as we speak kind of unfairly defines Chris Paul's career. Yes, the Clippers were supposed to make the Western Conference Finals that year, and I even think they would have given the Warriors a hell of a time getting to the finals, but I still need to ask, where was the choke on Chris Paul's part? Even after missing games 1 and 2 with a lingering hamstring issue from the Spurs series, look at what he came back and averaged. Now, look at his numbers for the 3 closeout games in that series. Can you kindly point me in the direction of which one of those he didn't show up in? Are we gonna again ignore Game 5, Matt Barnes 1 for 8, Crawford 2 for 10, Redick 3 of 12? Game 6 was probably Paul's best game of the series, and he did all the work necessary to get them that big lead before Josh Smith exploded out of nowhere. Again, acting like you don't see Redick 4 for 13, Barnes 4 of 12, Crawford 4 of 13. How in the world does the Game 6 meltdown fall on Chris Paul's shoulder when he was the best player in that game? It's because he's the best player and he always has to find a way, right? But if it's LeBron playing great and his teammates turn on airplane mode, it couldn't possibly be his fault. Next, Game 7, Paul again puts up a double-double. Redick nowhere to be found with 6 turnovers, Crawford again inefficient, paramedics had to check Matt Barnes for a pulse, Austin Rivers shooting 25%. Are you seeing a pattern here yet? The Rockets series of 2015 is Paul's defining moment in his legacy, the one that carries the most weight in giving him the choker label, and he did literally everything he was supposed to. So let's have a look at the series I've missed. I'll give you 2009 against Denver because that was just a terrible series, but I also want to point out that his 7-seeded Hornets had 0 chance against a Denver team that even gave Kobe Bryant's Lakers a run for their money. In 2012, which was his first year with the Clippers, they simply ran up against a superior Spurs team, and although it really doesn't matter because they were swept, you should still check out his closeout stats for the game right here. But 2014 is a series I really want to talk about, because here lies the only somewhat concrete evidence one might have for calling him a choker, and even then, this evidence is shaky as hell. First, let's start by showing that he played an amazing Game 7 to narrowly close out the Warriors that year, which should be starting to hold some weight to you considering damn near every closeout game I've showed you from him has been amazing, but somehow he's known for choking. Anyways, that series against the Thunder was something. First, Game 6 was the only closeout game of that series. Have a look at his stats, and yes, they're amazing, as they always are, but the more important part of this series was Game 5 where the Clippers could have taken a 3-2 lead back to LA. They led by 7 points with 49 seconds to go, so the fact that you know they lose has a choke written all over it, right? Well, first off, when looking at his stat line, you see that he had 17 and 14 with 5 turnovers. 2 of those turnovers were crucial to the loss, and there lies all your evidence for calling him a career choker. Looking at the turnovers, the first one was horrible because he left his feet for a pass, trying to pass it to Glenn Davis to play a free throw game, and admittedly, that made no sense. What also made no sense was how the Clippers didn't get the ball back right after that happened because it undeniably went out of bounds on Reggie Jackson. Referees said the replay was inconclusive, but I can see that ball went off of him clearer than I can see Ginobili's bald spot. So you know what? You want to blame Paul for that turnover? You know, fine, I agree with you. Just know that wasn't the only thing that helped them lose that game. Then, in a very crucial possession, Paul turned the ball over after an obvious foul by Reggie Jackson. I get it, that's just how games get called at the end, so he wasn't going to get that foul, but we're also not going to pretend that Paul just lost the ball in a choke. But taking up for Paul's mistakes at the end of that game wasn't really my point here. Officially, since we can't change what happened, Paul has 3 giant mistakes at the end of that game that eventually cost him the series. So, your most concrete evidence of Paul being a career-long choker is that he turned over the ball once, fouled Westbrook on a possession that shouldn't have even happened, and lost the ball after being fouled. You mean to tell me that trumps everything else he's ever done in the playoffs and all these closeout games? No. Paul is labeled a choker because unless your name is LeBron, you don't get a pass in the playoffs for being the only one on your team to show up. Apparently, when you're the best player, the idea is that even if nobody else on the team scores a single point, it's still on you to find a way to carry them to victory, meaning you either need to put up a Wilt Chamberlain stat line or you're a choker. That has to be the most ridiculous line of logic in the sports world today, and it's what's led to this false narrative that Chris Paul himself is a choker. Check this out. Here are Paul's 20 closeout games for his career. His record comes out to 6-14 in these games, and his averages are 20 points, 10 assists, 6 rebounds, 2 steals, and 47% shooting. In what world does someone who puts up those numbers in his career closeout games get labeled a choker? That's the confusion between choking and losing. The most common thing I've seen is that he hasn't made a finals, he hasn't made a conference finals, he routinely gets eliminated, so therefore he's a choker. No, just no. The teams he's on always lose, and as you've seen, his teammates regularly disappear on him, but he shows up with the best performances nearly every time the series is on the line. That's not what choking looks like. Here's what choking actually looks like. Magic Johnson in the 1984 NBA Finals making mistake after mistake directly leading to his team losing that series. That's a choke. LeBron James in the 2011 Finals putting up 17 points a game and leading his team in turnovers in a series they should have won. That's a choke. Stephen Curry in Game 7 with 17 points on 31% field goal shooting, missing clutch shots, and turning the ball over in one of the biggest plays of the game. That's a choke. But are the other 3 players labeled as career-long chokers to the same level as Paul for those rare slip-ups? No, but of course that's because they've won championships and MVPs and they've been out of the second round. But do you know what also helped them a lot with that? The fact that they've played on championship teams where health wasn't constantly a problem, the fact they've had amazing teammates that could consistently play their roles, and the fact that they've showed up more times than not win or lose. The difference between Paul being called a choker or not is simply winning on the biggest stages, and what I'm getting at is the fact that by everything I've showed you, Paul has 98% of the time done his part to carry his team to the win. So just because Paul's teams haven't won doesn't make him a choker. It makes him a player that hasn't won anything, and those simply aren't the same thing. If his closeout games are riddled with turnovers, mistakes, missed shots, and he hadn't won anything, that's what a choker would look like. Not somebody who averages a double-double in their closeout games along with consistently being the best and one of the only players to show up during those events. So I think it's fair if maybe you want to say Chris Paul hasn't been able to elevate his game like a Kevin Durant or a Stephen Curry. You know, those guys in a closeout game that can score like 40 points or 50 points and get really hot and just completely take over a game. If that's your criticism of Paul, sure, I can deal with that. But as far as this lazy narrative about him just flat out being a choker, it's time to get this ridiculous, overused, lazy, unsupported argument the fuck out of here with the rest of the blanket statements that NBA fans use without actually considering any facts.
Adios.